everybody up. And she did these trips constantly. So her sister started running her business out of Las Vegas, doing the bookings and all that biz. And for the couple hours Georgie would be in town, her sister would do her laundry for her. And she was tired of trying to get all this motor grease and things like that out of Georgie's clothing, so she started making Georgie's clothing. Leopard skin print, everything, leopard skin. She'd have like a leopard skin leotard with a tail on it, a hard hat, and often donning a red cape. That's how she rolled. Always, of course, beer in her hand. And she ran those trips and ran them. There's Georgie stories down here that burn off both your ears. Everybody seemed to love her. Everybody seemed to respect her. She trained some of the best. People that are in high positions down here today broke through on Georgie stuff. She did trips up in Alaska. She had all things in Mexico. And there was a story about she'd pay all of her boatmen at the end of the river season. They'd be up in Alaska sitting around the big table. She's handing out envelopes as everybody's drinking their beers. And for the new guides, she'd be like, I'm sorry, you don't get paid this year. And you got to find your ride back to the mainland. I ain't got a ticket for you. And they showed up the next year to work anyways. That's how powerful it was. Hey, we don't care about the money, Georgie. Can we come back, please? Heck yeah, you can. She trained a lot of folks. On her trips, how we have snack time, they had what was called an eggy break. The food was really lax on those Georgie trips. She didn't care about the food. It was all about being in Grand Canyon. They'd have eggy break, and that's where everybody'd have a hard-boiled egg. They did some little crazy song, and then you'd break the egg on your head. There was always one raw egg. And that's the one you wanted, because if you got the raw egg, you were put through a ceremony that night, and you became an official Georgie Royal River Rat. So the person who got the egg all over their head is like, I got it! Woo! But then what you would do after you had your egg cracked and you were eating your egg, she'd pass around the cheese whiz and the bacon bits. You'd put cheese whiz on your finger and stick it in the bacon bits. You'd have your egg. And that's how they did it. It's crazy stuff. But she did all types of things. She pops up in a lot of stories. And she ran down here for years. She was in her 80s, still crewing, still working down here, running these big boats. And 1990, they made it a rule that you could no longer drink beer from morning you woke up to nighttime when you went to bed. You had to wait till you get to camp. And the park superintendent himself called Georgie in for a meeting to explain it in detail, the rules. Because every picture of Georgie, she's got a Coors beer. At this point, she's about 80 years old. And they say one hand was shaped like a tiller handle. The other one was like a Coors beer, just a little more narrow than the others. They're just always like that. Well, the superintendent pulled her in, told him all about it. She said, well, that's fine. Don't bother me because I don't drink. I was like, Georgie. She said, well, maybe a beer once in a while, but you know. And so she promised him that she wouldn't drink beer all day. And she started drinking Coors Cutter, the non-alcoholic beer. And that summer she switched to the Coors Cutter. She started losing weight really fast and didn't have the same energy that she once did. She kept blaming it on that Coors Cutter. Then a good friend of hers noticed that, a woman named Teresa Yates, noticed that Georgie was not as spry as she was and recommended that Georgie go to the doctor for the second time in her life. At this point, Georgie's face looks like a topographical map. She's wearing leopard skin all the time. She's just homemade haircuts. And she rolled into that doctor's office. And the doctor looked her up and down and examined her. He said, Georgie, I heard a lot about you. You shoot straight from the hip. I'm not going to blow any smoke. I can't believe you're standing in front of me right now. You're ate up head to toe with cancer. Georgie said, well, Doc, I figured it was something like that. And went back to work. The story about Georgie was spreading like wildfire through Grand Canyon. Everybody was talking about Georgie slowing down and passing on. Everybody was giving her calls. So for Georgie's 81st birthday, they threw a party for her at the Hatch Company warehouse. It's this huge warehouse in Marble Canyon. Biggest party the Arizona Strip has ever seen. Every boatman of that era was there. The band was playing. You guys will see some footage of it. You know, it's rocking and rolling, and Georgie's out there dancing with everybody. They're having the time of their life. Right about it's time for birthday cake, bam! Here comes this big birthday cake rolled in on a pallet jack. And it's made like a giant Georgie boat. There's so many candles on it, it's a good thing the LA Fire Department was there, because that thing would have lit up the whole place. And they sang happy birthday. When they were blowing out the candles, boom! Out from the cake pops the biggest, hairiest boatman you can imagine. about 6'8". See, it's true, Brian Durker. And he was donned in his leopard skin leotard and his red cape, and they hoisted him out with a rope, and he scooped Georgie up into his arms, took her outside to the pink Cadillac convertible, and they drove over top of the Echo Cliffs and fired fireworks off over Grand Canyon all night long. Hooting and hollering. Edward Abbey was there. The whole thing. It was rocking and rolling. Well, the next morning after that big party, everybody is sitting up there at Marble Canyon Lodge. That's where we have breakfast before the trip, before we pick up our passengers. It's a big wooden table in there, and good river photos all over the place. And Georgie's at the head of that table, and everybody's sitting around kind of crying in their eggs, looking at Georgie, kind of knowing they could tell it was probably to be the last time they'd see her. And nobody's saying much. And Georgie looked up with those blue eyes. He's like, "Look at you guys. You're acting like I'm already dead. I'm an old woman. I made it this far looking at this table. I can see there's many of you who are on trips with me when I should have died years ago. But we made it this far." She said, "Don't worry about me. I'll be fine. I'm dying. I'm going to pass on. But don't grieve me. I gave up years of that on my daughter." She said, "But I do have a favor to ask you. When you take those folks down there, do what I love to do, show them Grand Canyon. When you're telling those stories about folks down there, be sure to tell them a little one about Georgie." And so everybody drank a Coors beer, said their goodbyes to Georgie, and after that, she was in a wheelchair that morning. They rolled her down to Lee's Ferry, where the boats are put in, and she sat out there and looked at the boats and the boatmen all day long, and a couple weeks later passed away. And that's the story of Georgie. So anytime you see a boat woman down here, boatman, female boatman, she probably has some type of leopard skin stuff for Georgie. She inspires. She was an inspiration to a lot of folks.